Hi, everybody, and good evening. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight for this artistic roundtable with the Victory Gardens Playwrights Ensemble, moderated by Artistic Director Ken Martin. To start off, I know that we're all coming from different places, but on behalf of Victory Gardens, I do want to acknowledge that Chicago remains the traditional homelands of over a dozen different tribes, including the Odawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. And we honor the original ancestors of this land and offer respect to the indigenous people still residing here, recognizing that their land was stolen and that Victory Gardens, as an organization founded and largely staffed by settlers, continues to exist and profit from that theft. We strive for accountability in that history and in our relationships going forward. As I said, I'm Kat Zukaitis. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Also joining us tonight are ASL interpreters Vera Marie Baldoza and Julika Lachey. Thank you for interpreting this discussion for us. A couple more words of introduction. When you logged on, you got a message that this town hall is being live streamed. We're not streaming this out anywhere. We're using a third-party service, rev.com, to live caption this town hall. That's what that's referring to. If you would like to turn on closed captions, please click on the closed captions button at the bottom of your screen. We'll take questions toward the end of this town hall. So if you have a question for us, please type it in to the Q&A or the chat, which you can find by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or chatting to hosts and panelists. And finally, I want to thank Meyer Brown for sponsoring the Summer's Town Hall series, allowing us to chat with all of you. So, Kenna, can I turn it over to you now?
Yes, thank you so much, Kat. And hello, everyone at home watching. As Kat said, my name is Ken Martin, and I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm very happy to be able to moderate this conversation with this amazing group of writers this evening. First things first, in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, we are joined thus far this evening by 3 of our 4 new Playwrights Ensemble members. Our 4th member is a little caught up at work at the moment, it sounds like, and will likely be joining us a little bit later into the chat, it sounds like. So I wanted to just start there by acknowledging the absence of Isaac Gómez before I go into introducing our other new Victory Gardens artists that have joined us. Also, I'm just really excited to have this conversation with all 3 of you and eventually Isaac when Isaac is able to join us a little bit later, because you said something really specific to me when we decided we wanted to do this event. You wanted to have an event that focused specifically on the craft of playwriting. And I really, really was excited to hear you all say that. I think when there's been many types of events like this from theaters over the last 16 months that have focused on maybe some of the trials and tribulations of the pandemic or the varied struggles that all of us as theater artists have had to contend with in our respective careers. But this one is going to be a conversation, just so the audience knows out the gate, that is focusing on the craft of playwriting and how these writers go about actually making the work that they end up creating that will eventually end up on our stages. So without any further ado, I'm so excited. I got to change out of my work clothes. I join you all to feel like I'm sitting in my living room having a conversation with you to talk about what is the craft of playwriting and how you approach it. So first things first, I want to give you each a chance to introduce yourselves, and we'll keep it simple to start because we're going to have such a wide-ranging conversation about how you do your work and everything else. But I'll start with this simple prompt. Tell us your name, where exactly you happen to be calling from at the moment, because we're spread out a little bit as we still contend with the pandemic. And then lastly, I'd love for you, and this might, I'm going to ask you to see if you can do your Cliff Notes version of an answer to this one. But if you could tell us your name, where you are quite literally, and what it was that sparked your journey to become a writer. And I know that can be a loaded question maybe to start, but I'm like, why not start there and let you all work through it? I'll just go with who's first on my screen, Marisa. And then if you want to pass it to one of your colleagues from there, we'll keep going and get the chat going from there.
Sure. Hello, bonjour. My name is Marisa Carr. I use she, her pronouns. I am zooming in from Chicago and Chicago, known to many of you as Chicago, which is part of my Anishinaabe homelands. And wow, thinking about what sparked my journey to being a writer, you know, I feel like I've been writing Pretty much my entire life. I always knew that it was something that I was going to do. I can tell you that what sparked my journey to playwriting specifically was that somebody offered me money to do it. And I said, all right, I bet I could figure that out. And I'm going to pass it from here to Keelay.
Good evening, everyone joining us. I'm Keelay Gipson. My pronouns are anything respectful. And I am coming to you from originally what was Lenape land in Brooklyn, New York. And what made me become a playwright was there wasn't representation, diversity, inclusion. When I graduated college, there weren't those conversations going on. And so I was going in for parts that I didn't see myself reflected in, and I wanted to fill the gap. So I started writing, and then slowly transitioned away from acting. I'm an actor who is in recovery from acting, and and then writing started paying the bills. So here I am, and I'm going to pass it to my friend and colleague Stacey Rose.
Hey y'all, hey. I am Stacey Rose. I am calling from what was and is Catawba land in Charlotte, North Carolina. My home, my home. My pronouns are she, her. And it's funny because my road to writing, it kind of contains a little bit of each one of your stories. Well, one, I decided after a divorce when I was 30. Well, I've been writing my whole life. I'll do that. Like what me and Marisa had in common. Like I wrote my first play as a response to Bob Johnson selling BET to Viacom, and didn't know I was writing a play. I was just mad. And so what eventually kind of affirmed I was a playwright is I went to an undergraduate program in theater. I landed there when I was 30, and there was like literally nothing there for me to be in. I was trained to act and all of that. And I what ended up landing was playwriting. So I did that, and I like somewhere in the same kind of at the same time I got paid to come out to Oregon for some reason, because it was crazy. It was a very kismet bunch of circumstances that was like, okay, maybe I am a playwright. We'll see how this goes. But yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you all for humoring me with that first question out the gate. You know, I recognize that all of our respective pathways to the things that we do in this industry are normally by chance, right? And happenstance in terms of when we practically first get to do it professionally for the first time. But I'm curious to hear a little bit more about you all as storytellers a little bit, and see if we can kind of break into a conversation between the three of you about how you actually go about writing stories and talking process, since that's what you all wanted to focus on as far as craft is concerned. And I guess like a first big question that I have is, do you remember at all, like the first time that you felt like you really called yourself a playwright, right? The first time that you were really working on something. And I should say for the audience, what I love about this group of playwrights that we selected for our Playwrights Ensemble for this iteration or for this next 3 years, you all are a mixed group. Some of you have had plays produced at various places. Some of you haven't been produced at all yet. Some came with agents, some had no agent. So it's also a really eclectic group that we've managed to put together. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective, like, do you recall on the first thing that you really called yourself a playwright on, that first play that you wrote that actually had people maybe come see it or come to a reading of it or give you a workshop or whatever? What was it that made you literally want to put that first word on the page? I'm just curious. Like, do you remember, and this is getting into territory of like, what was your first play? Which is, I know, a question that a lot of playwrights hate sometimes because they're like, it wasn't good. But I'm curious to know, like, do you remember what the impetus was when you wrote your first play? Anybody can answer. I'm not going around.
Well, no, I had kind of already started the story.
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I started my first play, which was called Buckeye Television. It was a satire about BET and the selling of it to Bob Johnson. And I'm going to say it was a very good play. It should have been nationally acclaimed. But the reason I say that is because it came from like, it's actually hard to tap into like I have to try to do it now. Whereas then I just sat and wrote that play from a place of just sheer rage about Bob Johnson selling BET. And people read it and they were like, this is funny as hell, but it's also true. And it was around like that play never got put up or anything like that. But it was around that time that I was like, maybe this is a thing. And then the thing that actually landed it is when my second play was one that students took at UNC Charlotte and like ran with. It was like, we want to produce it. I was like, what do you mean? And so they ended up putting up the show, and faculty from all over campus came to see it. And I was like, oh, I guess I do this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Keelay, Marisa, do you want to elaborate?
Oh, yeah, I will. I wrote this play out of necessity because, oh, child, I was homeless when I was writing my first play. It was called Nigger Faggot, and it was an attempt at me trying to like come to terms with some racism due to housing that I had just experienced. I was supposed to move in with these people, but then they saw my ID, they saw a photocopy of my ID, and then they didn't want to rent to me anymore. And I sort of told these people I was going to move in with, either you can be friends with me or you can move into this new apartment. And they chose to move into the new apartment. And so I sort of was rudderless for a little while and was couch surfing and needed something to do. Mind you, I had 3 jobs and an internship and was doing that while being homeless and couch surfing. And I just needed something that killed the time. I was like an actor trying to like get a job and audition. And so I was in coffee shops a lot, and I wrote this play out of kind of like Stacey, out of pure rage of like experiencing racism. And it was before, marriage equality was happening. So we were having these conversations about queerness. And I sort of split myself down the middle and was like, what if my queerness could argue with my Blackness? And then Nigger Faggot was born. And I submitted it to the Downtown Urban Theater Festival. And one day Reggie Gaines called me and was like, I don't know if this play is going to go anywhere, but I just read it and you're a playwright, keep writing. And I heeded his words, and that's how I started writing.
Wow. I don't know that I've ever, me and you have had many conversations. I don't know that I ever knew that was the title of your first play, and it tracks in a way in terms of knowing the rest of your work and knowing the kind of things you like to write. I'm like, that tracks if that was the title of your first play. Yep. Marisa, do you want to talk about your journey? I'm curious to hear.
Yeah. So I started working in theater as an actor, like a lot of people, I think, and like a lot of my fellow playwrights. And when I was in my early 20s, a small theater company that I had worked with a couple times as an actor called me up and they said, hey, we got a grant to do this program where we're commissioning people who are artists but have never written a play before. So do you want to write a play for us? We'll give you X amount of money, and whatever you write, we promise we'll produce it no matter what. And it was an amount of money that at the age of 24, I was like, oh my God, wow, seriously? So I was just kind of like, yeah, I could write a play. I bet I could do that. So I did. It was called Reconciliation, and it is set in a dystopian future in which the United States government has undergone a truth and reconciliation process with Indigenous peoples. At Rise, the protagonist is on trial for domestic terrorism and failure to reconcile, and it kind of explores what it means for Native people to talk about quote unquote reconciliation in the context of ongoing settler colonialism, and in the context of a state of affairs when nothing has meaningfully been redressed or made right. And what do we stand to gain by engaging with that, and what do we stand to lose? At the time, I had recently traveled to South Africa, which, of course, is kind of one of the countries that people think of as one of the really prototypical truth and reconciliation processes globally. And when I was writing it, it was also the 150-year anniversary of the statehood of the state of Minnesota, and also the 150-year, which is where I was living at the time, and the 150-year anniversary of the largest mass execution in United States history, which was of Dakota people in Minnesota in 1862 under President Lincoln. And so there were all of these conversations going on between the Dakota people, which is not my tribe, but the tribe that is indigenous to the land that I was living on at the time, and the state talking about, what does it mean for us to talk about reconciling with the state of Minnesota? What does it mean for us to talk about reconciling with the United States after, this atrocity that was done to our people? Because after the mass execution, Dakota people were put in a concentration camp, and then they were forcibly marched across the state and exiled. And I had friends and people that I was in community with all over the spectrum from, it's not doing us any good to hang on to this. We need to, heal and move forward, to people who were like, when they can bring back all of my dead ancestors and they return my land in its original pristine form, then we can talk about reconciliation. But until then, there's nothing to talk about. And a lot of people in between. So that's what I was interested in the time. I wrote a play to try to kind of explore some of those ideas. And at that time, I think I was like, I wrote a play, they gave me some money, so I did it, but I don't know if I'm like a playwright. But then at Pillsbury House Theater in Minneapolis, somebody said, well, there's this fellowship at Pill House, and if you apply for it, they'll give you more money to write another play, and they'll produce it. And I was like, all right. And then at the Playwrights Center in Minneapolis, they were like, there's this thing here that you can apply for again, and they'll give you even more money to write more plays. So I was just kind of like, well, let's see how long I can keep this hustle going for. And it just kind of ended up turning into the thing that I do now.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. It feels like a good segue to a question that I have for all three of you, which is, all of you talk about writing your first plays kind of from different varying places of like rage, opportunity, a need to try to just get something on paper and express something, right? So I'm curious, like that was all for most of you now many years ago, and you've written many a play since then. You're highly decorated in terms of you've been to every fellowship thing. Between the four of you, including Isaac, who's not joined us yet, have had what feels like all of them from the major theaters. Seriously, between the four of you, I feel like you've managed to grab all of the.
We've done some things.
Yeah, you've done some things. And so now that you're at this very different point, a question that I'm always curious about that I don't think people really understand is like, what does a typical day look like for all of you right? I knew you were going to hate this question, and I knew I had to ask it. And I know it's a loaded question for all three of you, and for Isaac here, because I know you're all at these very different points in your respective careers where you're navigating so many different things. But I'm like, I think many would be curious, for those at home watching, what does a typical day look like for you all as writers? Knowing that you're juggling multiple projects, writing on multiple things at once, like, go ahead and jump into it. And it's
procrastination, right? Like it's just a bunch of pacing back and forth, and then sitting down and moving commas and periods, and then getting up and making a sandwich, and then taking a smoke break. At least for me, I don't know. I feel like I am a camel when it comes to writing, and so like I'll watch a bunch of things, I'll read a bunch of things, I'll like look at a bunch of art, and I won't write for like 3 or 4 months. And then one day I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and the muse will be like, it's now or never, bitch. And then it's like 60 pages. whenever I go to like an artist retreat, they always hate me because I'm like, I watched a movie today, I read a book, I didn't do nothing. And they're like, oh, so he's not here to work, he's here on vacation. And then like one day I'll come in to breakfast and be like, oh, I finished my play. And they'll be like, fuck you, Keelay, fuck you.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I tend to do a lot. I need to figure things out there's a lot of pre-work that I do internally before I'm typically ready to create like a draft of the script. So for me, like Keelay was saying, that can mean like taking in a lot of media. I tend to make a lot of like big charts and Excel sheets. I do a lot of like building structure in advance, and it can take months before I'm ready to start writing something. But once I'm ready, once I've done all of that pre-work and I'm ready to start writing, I can typically produce a script in like a couple weeks. But you know, I'll have projects going and my mom will be like, oh, well, did you write your play yet? And I'm like, no, Mom, I didn't write my play yet because I'm not ready. So be like, oh, well, you better get to work on that. But I'm like, I am working. I'm just working in my head, okay? But like, you know, I work full time and I'm in grad school. So I rarely have like a full writing day. But like, the last time I was at a residency, I spent like the first half of the residency. I was like, oh, well, you know, I went record shopping today and then I found some Sharpies. So I drew all of the tattoos that I wished I had when I was 14 on my hands. And, you know, that was my work day. But I did finish a full draft from start to finish within that 2 weeks. So it's just, you know, it's like the iceberg, right? Like the part where you actually write the pages is just the tip of the iceberg. And then like most of the iceberg is underwater. And that's, for me, all of the stuff that has to happen before I'm ready to actually create like pages of script.
Mm-hmm. Stacey?
Yeah, the same is, I don't really need to talk. Because the same is very true for me, particularly with consuming media. I start everything with a playlist. Like literally every project has a Spotify playlist. And I listen to this, I just am very musically inclined, but don't play an instrument at all. Please don't let that violin fool you. That was a COVID hobby that never happened. But it's sexy in the background. Those are also Bojangles cinnamon biscuits on that couch, in case you were wondering. You don't want those, Marisa. I forgot about them. I could probably break windows with them. But anyway, it's fine. But so all of what Marisa's saying about like consuming media and reading things and doing all of that, but also battling the anxiety in me that is constantly telling me that I cannot do what I have been assigned to do. I can't like it's literally, I think for me, that's the biggest battle, because that's what lives at the heart of my procrastination, is this thing that I have named Gladys, that is constantly telling me that this is a mistake and this is a fluke and they're going to find out. And so what I have to do is more than anything is massage her down just quiet enough to where I can sit and sneak in some pages. And what I try to do is, particularly with, it just seems like the sheer amount of shit that I'm writing now, is like I'm writing for a television show, and that's a collaborative effort, and it is not easy because you just don't know, you know, the showrunner's the boss, the EP's the boss. So you can, like this weekend, I spent all weekend writing scenes that I thought were going to be in my episode, and we're pretty much trashing all of them. So it's sort of like, that's ego destroying, but it's just sort of like also like it's kind of fortifying. It builds you, it gets you kind of, it makes you kind of tenacious in one way. But there are projects that are sitting with me, commissions, things that I need to get done. And I will constantly save things, videos, whatever, to different lists, whether it's an article on Facebook, whether it's just anything I find, and put it all together. And there's this one thing that and Annie Baker, she said, she's my thesis professor in grad school, and she said this to me, and I swear to God, she was not wrong. She was like, I allow myself 2 weeks of research just to dive in and just go. And then I never look at it again. And that is so true. Like, outside of the playlist, I really don't go back unless it's like a fact I need or something very specific I need. I just absorb it. And then, like they say, it's just sort of like it's like, bitch, now or never. You got this deadline now. What we finna do? And it's just like, go. And I have pages, and then I cry and eat Cheetos.
Yeah, what you said about Gladys was really real for me too,
Yeah.
because just about everything that I've ever written, I spend at least 90% of the process thinking, this was a mistake, I can't do this, this is going to be terrible, I don't know why people are giving me money for this, they're all going to be so angry at me when they see how terrible. And then like in the home stretch, then I'm like, oh no, actually I think this is actually pretty good. It's gonna be okay. But most of the process is anxiety and doubt.
I want to just to clarify for our audience watching at home that Gladys specifically is what Stacey has named her kind of anxiety monster. Just in case people missed that earlier to what Marisa was referencing. You know, I'm really curious to kind of shift us a little bit. For each of you, it's really interesting. I didn't really know all 4 of you in totality, like super well, before maybe like the last year and a half or so, right? That in various ways, I've been able to either be introduced to your work or to you literally. And then with, you know, a good chunk of you, it was conversations like after I had this job, when I was thinking about things and reading work, that I was like, okay, this makes the most sense. For each of you, however, there is a play that comes to mind where I remember reading the play, and I read a lot of plays for folks watching at home. They all know this because they're aware of my habits. I take every Friday to read because there's so many plays that come Kat and I's way that we take Fridays in the afternoons to literally just try to get through as many as we can. Normally that's 5 or 6 a week. So I read quite a few plays. And I say that because for each of you, and I'll include Isaac in this, though he's not here, the thing about it is that all of you have a play that comes to mind immediately where I'm like, oop, that was the play that made me know that it was a really exciting time to have you here. And I want to kind of talk about that and then couple it with a question, which is like, what was the easiest play you think you've written in your career, and what was the hardest play that you think you've written? But I want to take a minute to reference a couple of things. So Marisa, you have this play that you know how obsessed I am with it, and now most of the staff is obsessed with it too, called Punk Rock Mixtape Play, that I know draws from like personal experiences of yours and whatnot. And I'll let you talk a little bit more about it if it happens to come up later, you know, in an answer to one of these questions that I'm asking. But I have to highlight, like, that was the play when I read that where it's like, oh, got it. Because it is so naturally theatrical, as I've told you. But at the same time, it's such an interesting topic in terms of what it is that you're exploring, right? And then on the flip side of that, in a very different vein, Keelay, I've read all of the plays that all of you have sent me at this point, but the play that really got me, and for those who maybe are watching from home who've been VG fans for a while, Keelay was featured in the Ignition Festival in 2018, 19? Which one? 18, right? Yeah, 19. That's what it was. It was just before the shutdown. That's what it was. Forgive me. So I know you were featured with your play New Slaves at that point, but there's another play of yours that I read recently when I was making decisions and thinking about this with Kat called Demons that I'm also obsessed with of yours, which operates in a completely different way, right? And then Stacey, I don't even know, like, you know, if there is just like the one per se, to the extent that I got to experience a couple of yours in quick succession on accident, really. And that was just like a moment where I was like, who is this human? And that was like the kind of impetus, right? And so, but there's a play of yours in particular that comes to mind that I love of yours, Stacey, which is your play As If. As Is, forgive me, As Is. I said the title incorrectly, As Is, which also explores so many things. So I'm just curious. Oh, and with Isaac, though they're not here, I will share which play of theirs was exciting to me, which is they've got a couple, but their play Leopard Play, for people who might be fans and saw it had a production at Steep just before the shutdown hit, was one where I was like, ooh, okay, Isaac is cooking with some real oil there. So I just reference all of those because you've all done so many incredible things. And yet at the same time, you've got a myriad of plays, all of you, within your canon, if you will. What felt the hardest to write? What felt the easiest to write? You could choose any of them. And if we don't know what they are, maybe give us like the brief Cliff Notes version about what it's like. Doesn't matter who goes first.
I'll go. Legacyland was like labor and delivery. Like it literally, I started it in 2014 when I was in grad school, and it was so painful. And I cried so much that I put it in a closet and I didn't touch it again until I got a Many Voices Fellowship at the Playwrights Center. And I wanted to take that opportunity to do it. So I got a really good therapist. I had a really good creative team. And I said, like, these folks are going to love me through to the first draft of this. But I really did have to dissect out my own emotional and literal experiences and my family's own emotional and literal experiences and kind of synthesize it into what is the emotional truth of the story I wanted to tell. So that's what that play became. But that was just emotionally hardest. Yeah. The easiest play.
Really quick, that was your play, just to make sure you clock it for all the writers, that you were in the middle of putting up when the shutdown hit. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I was at KC Rep and we opened and closed on the same night. And I felt really terrible because I felt in a way very satisfied in that I had the process, right? But the actors didn't get to live in those characters the way that they needed to. So I kind of mourned their ability to be in process and in conversation with those characters. But I felt like I was so full by the end of that process. But the easiest play I think I've ever written, and Kim Matt, this is a me and you story, is when I wrote Thank You for Coming, Take Care for Theater for One. Oh, yes. Over the shutdown. And it's so funny because the play has been so impactful. It's now been done in Chicago and Dubai. And it's like a 4-page play about a woman who's turning over custody of her child. But I kind of felt the ideas. And I wrote for 2 hours. I sent it to Ken Matt. I was like, does that feel like something? And he's like, yeah, just make that change. And so I never had something come that easily, but I'm always glad.
I forgotten about this, but yes, I can verify that one was very quick, apparently, because you literally the night before were like, I might send you something, will you read it? And then the next thing I know, it was the New York Times critic.
It was so crazy. I'm like, was that what I had to do?
Yeah. I don't know what lesson there is in that.
You know what the lesson, none of it means anything. Don't you start me, buddy.
I know. So Marisa and Keelay, I'm curious to hear, like, what feels the hardest, what feels easy? I think this is also great because it's giving our audience a peek into the types of plays that you write, the themes and the things that you discuss. So feel free to expound on that, as you talk about it. But what Keelay and Marisa felt the easiest or the hardest? And the hardest, I want both, please.
I think for me, Demons, the play that you mentioned, Ken Matt, was both. And I know that's a cop-out, so if you want me to, I can name another play that was either or. But it was hard because it deals with death and grief. And yeah, I lost my mother during the shutdown. Everyone else was grieving, work and the loss of theater and the loss of their routines. And I was mourning the loss of my mother. And this play, it's kind of crazy because I wrote it in anticipation of a parent's death. I just sort of was having a thought experiment on paper. And then the next summer, I experienced what I was tackling in the play. And then that, with my second draft, like, it just sort of poured out of me, all of these feelings, the darkness that I felt in grief, and also the joy. Like, nobody tells you that when you're experiencing grief, you will have like this new relationship to memory. They will just flood in the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. It all, like, I feel like they're so tactile, my memories now. Whereas before this pause, I sort of like, memory was a thing I drew upon for like fodder for my plays, but like I didn't have a relationship with them. I didn't sit with them before I put them on paper. They just sort of were like, I don't know, artifacts that I could unearth and like use, honestly. And so I have a different relationship to my work, even as an artist, because of that play and what, my real life experience taught me about my art, and about my memory and my relationship to it. So honestly, that play saved me and helped me through it, as well as my therapist, as well as alcohol and marijuana. You said, Kid Matt.
I said tell the truth. I said speak the truth. I'm not one to censor. You all know that, to speak the truth.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate you sharing that one, and how that was both the easiest and the hardest. I will allow that cop out in the interest of wanting to hear from Marisa, and also want to get to some questions from the audience in a little bit. But yeah, Marisa, what's your response? Easiest and hardest play you've worked on?
Every time I'm working on a play at the time, it feels like the hardest play that I've ever written. So right now, I'm working on a play about boxing that has just a lot of kind of intertwining segments within each round, because it's set in 12 rounds like a title fight. And so that's really challenging me structurally right now in terms of, figuring the architecture of tracking all of these storylines and making sure that they braid together in a satisfying way. So right now that feels really hard. I think perhaps actually the most challenging play that I've written has been Punk Rock Mixtape Play, because it was, a semi-autobiographical play, and there was just a lot of emotional work that I had to do to be ready to write it. And then in the process of writing it and revising it, parse through what is me and what is the story, and where is the line between the people in my life and these characters, and what can I let go of? So it was just, there was a lot of work that I had to do to be able to write that play. That was good, but hard. The easiest play that I've written that I'm thinking of right now is last summer, I wrote a series of short audio plays for Milwaukee Rep, and there's a play in that series called Bridge Wars, or a short historical comedy on the founding of the city of Milwaukee. And I'm gonna say that one was the easiest. And if anyone who was part of that process heard me say that, they would probably be like, seriously, Marisa, are you fucking kidding me? Because we went through so many rounds of like back and forth and revision and re-recording with that play. But in terms of banging out a draft, it was the last out of the series of plays. It was the last one that I did, and it was a farce. So I kind of just gave myself permission, like, this is going to be real dumb. Like, this is going to be real dumb, and I'm just going to go for it. And I did. And the first draft came out really easily. There was a lot more work after that, but in terms of just getting something on the page quickly without spending a lot of time bogged down in my own mind, that felt like maybe one of the easiest.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. I want to transition us to taking some questions from the audience. So I'm going to encourage everyone to utilize the chat function in order to submit questions to us, and I will ask them out loud. I'll read them aloud if you send them our way. I'm also, make sure our technical support person is behind the scenes to verify this. I think we're able to use both the Q&A function as well as the chat potentially, but I will verify that shortly if people want to start throwing some questions. And I see a couple that have already popped up from audience members, so feel free to start asking those in the chat. Really quickly, just as a way to kind of transition us for a moment, I also want to acknowledge one thing that Marisa, you just buried the lead. Your boxing play that you're working on, you forgot to mention that you are yourself a boxer in terms of like where that's generating from you. And I just wanted to acknowledge, I was like, you were real slick about burying the lead on that one. But you're writing an amazing play that it centers on what is your own experience as a boxer. So I just wanted to highlight that. All right, so let me ask this question that's coming in from the audience and those watching at home. Derek McFadder has asked, how has your process shifted as we entered a virtual theater / play development moment? What's changing for you? What's staying the same? I'll repeat that for you all. The question is, how has your process shifted as we entered a virtual theater / play development moment? And what's changing for you? What's staying the same? Ooh, good question.
My process hasn't really changed. I mean, before the pandemic, I mostly just sat alone in my apartment and wrote. And now that there's a pandemic, I still just sit alone in my apartment and write. You know, I think in terms of development, I've actually found it possible to do some really fruitful and fulfilling development work virtually over Zoom, you know, particularly in terms of like table work and dramaturgy and just hearing plays out loud. And of course, in a few of the plays that I'm developing right now, you know, there are aspects of the play that I'm eager to work on that I really just need to be in a room with other live humans. There's only so much boxing, for example, like that you can do over Zoom. But yeah, in terms of process, I don't feel like a whole lot has shifted for me.
What about you, Keelay and Stacey? Have things shifted for you, process-wise?
No, I kind of didn't engage with too much virtual theater. I don't know, I might be a theater snob, but I really wanted to move away from the screens. I was getting it so much as a professor and in other areas of my life. I really wanted to like leave that behind and get in touch with maybe my process, as we talked about it before, where it's like soaking up things or investing in watching things or getting in touch with media in that way. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are innovating the virtual space, and that's amazing. And I think that's something that you need to be called to do. And I really wasn't called during this time,
So for me, because in the middle of all of this, I started a play development organization in Charlotte. I've kind of had a very special relationship with kind of this whole, I've been on the producer side of it as well as on the playwright side of it. And for me, I think the most joy I've gotten in terms of process is actually on the producer side, is actually taking the opportunity to connect theater artists that I had like people I love, but who are far flung and probably wouldn't have met under, well, maybe in life would have met, but just wouldn't have, you know, met under other circumstances, and putting them in a Zoom room and having them have conversations. I think I'm feeding my community creatively in that way. In terms of my own personal development process, I think the only kind of plus for me, although I've done a lot of stuff in the virtual space. I've had 2 readings. I had the Theater for One Piece that went up well, it wasn't online in Chicago, I don't think. I don't know. I don't remember.
It was in person, actually.
It was in person in Chicago, but it was well, it was also in person. I don't know. There was a lot of online shit that I did. Okay. I did it, John. But what was more like, I think in terms of my own personal creative process, I think the plus was dramaturgy and getting to kind of dig into my plays and kind of inspect and dig around in them in ways that I, you know, typically haven't. But it was definitely more satisfying for me on the producing side, because one of the great joys of my life, quite literally, is connecting people who don't. I love being the person that is the reason why 2 people know each other anyway. And so that is why I get a lot of joy out of doing that with my organization's Theater Artist Talks. We did a lot of readings last season. We are not doing that shit this season, but we're doing a lot of other things that will bring folks together across the country and take, you know, decenter New York as the base of where theater happens. And that's the work that excites me, and Zoom has made that possible.
Yeah, you mentioned something, Stacey, that's a good segue to a different question we got from the audience. And there's a couple that are coming in. So I'm going to ask a couple and hope that we can get to as many as possible. So we don't have to, if all 3 of you don't want to respond, that's okay, because I want to get through as many of these as I possibly can. The question that came in was, you mentioned dramaturgs, what you were able to accomplish dramaturgically earlier, Stacey. And a question that we got was, what, if at all, is your relationship with a dramaturg while writing and or rehearsing? And what do you look for in one when you're beginning that relationship? And maybe just for our audience, for folks who are watching at home, if someone wants to sneak in within their answer what a dramaturg does for you / is, that might be helpful as well. But the question was, what, if at all, is your relationship with the dramaturg while writing versus in rehearsal? And what do you look for in one when you're beginning that relationship?
So I can jump in really quickly. So for me, a dramaturg is the person who almost functions in relationship to a play the way that I imagine an editor might function in regards to writing a book. That person often helps me like track themes, track storylines, figure out what threads are left hanging, what questions are being asked and answered or not answered. And really what I look for in a dramaturg varies depending on the play and what it needs, right? And you know, what questions I have about the play. I'm thinking about a play that I did some Zoom development on called Sturgeon Play that deals a lot with colonialism and also the environment. And I asked my friend Kristina Dajak to be my dramaturg in that process because, you know, she's someone who has a great understanding and eye for, you know, structure and tracking story, but a lot of her work focuses on theater and climate justice. So, you know, so there were things that there was an eye that I knew that she was going to bring to that process that that I knew was going to serve that particular play, you know, and where it was in process. I'm thinking about Punk Rock Mixtape Play. And there's somebody who I am really hoping to work with as a dramaturg on that play who is a fantastic dramaturg and lit manager, but also an old punk. So I know that there are things that she is going to be able to bring to that script in terms of helping me track inside or outsider information, which is one of my big questions about that play. So, you know, for me, it really just depends on the particular play and where it's at in process, and what questions I have about it at that point, and where I'm looking for support in terms of what I look for in a dramaturg.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was such a thorough answer. I want to move on to a different question, Keelay and Stacey, if that's all right, because I think you answered that so thoroughly. I want to get some more in if I can. So another question that just came through a little bit ago that I would love for you all, maybe there's a way that we can connect two questions, because I got a question a little bit earlier that asked, how well do you all know one another? Which I love the story about when you all got first introduced via email and what you did. So I'll let one of you talk about that. But a second question that we got that I'll kind of ask as a follow-up to that ahead of time. So someone asked, how well do you all know one another? A second question that we got, though, was, I'm curious about what most excites you about your new relationship with VG. What made you say yes to the invitation to join the ensemble? So I'll let you address both of those. How well do you know one another? And also, what excites you the most about your new relationship with Victory Gardens? And we're getting an Isaac appearance, it looks like, coming in here hot.
Okay, come in.
So we'll let the three, we'll let you all
in the room.
We'll let you all talk about that and the answer to that question, and then we'll let Isaac get in on some of the answering.
Sure. So one, I have been being pointed towards VG since I got out of grad school, and then I got to spend some time in Chicago when I was a Goodman Playwrights unit writer, and literally fell in love with Chicago theater and Chicago theater people. So this was an easy hell yes. Also, so Keelay I've known the longest, and Keelay is just like my ace. Like, he's the one that I call on in the midnight hour.
In the whenever, honey, whenever. And I will always pick up.
I didn't initially know that Keelay was going to be selected. So when I literally threw my phone, when I was like, what? Together? I was like,
I sent you a voice memo that was foolishness, I'm sure.
You did. I literally think it just said, bitch. I think that was the voice memo. And then I knew Marisa from Minneapolis, and I was like, shut, and she was so badass. And I really hated that I never got to know her better while we were there. And so that was exciting for me. And then Isaac, everyone kept telling me about, I heard about Leopard Play before I met Isaac. It got sent to me for my organization. They were like, oh no, there's this person writing about like queerness in Texas. Like, you need to read this. And I'm like, yep. So that's how I became familiar with everyone.
Yeah, that kind of answers that. I want to try to get to more questions. Isaac, I'm so glad you could join us. I know you're like in a different time zone and working, so I'm glad that you were able to finally pop in, my friend. Hello.
I am so sorry, everyone. I'm in a different time zone than when I scheduled this, and therefore I was like, oh, I'm logging in, and then just kidding. You're basically done. But hello, I'm so sorry.
You're fine. Listen, we're taking questions from the audience, and one of the questions that just came up, so I'll let you respond. I'm going to add a third question because it's from our board president who put this in the chat. I didn't think you could see it, so anyway, I'll just ask it out loud. But the question is like, what is it that excites you about joining the VG Playwrights Ensemble, and also how well did you all know each other ahead of time? And then as a bonus question specifically for you, Isaac, Chucky wants to know, like, why did you go blonde? Maybe it's a win there too. For folks watching at home, they know one another. But I'll throw that question to you to start. How well did you all know one another? What excites you the most about joining? And Chucky would like to know why you went blonde and when that was.
Yes. First of all, oh my goodness, what excites me the most? I mean, this group. It's this group of writers. It's like, I think something I've been so excited about with each of them in reading their plays and familiarizing myself with their work, not just since being made an ensemble member here, but you know, I used to work as the director of new play development at Victory Gardens. So I have actually like a pretty deep familiarity with each of them in a different context. And I've always been a fan of their brilliance and their innovation and their artistry. I'm inspired by these three other writers in particular because of their ability to what feels seamless and their ability to like transpose their deepest, darkest secrets, questions, yearnings, and desires in not just a theatrical space, but what feels like a spiritual space. Every time I read the plays of each of these three, I'm transported into something like, it feels like I'm reading a diary, you know what I mean? And I have yet to see a live production of these three, and I'm excited about that because I'm so hungry for the ability to experience it in my bones, not just in my heart. And so so that's what excites me the most about being here. And then I answered the familiarity question. I hadn't met any of them except maybe Marisa. I think we had like one little cafecito, but Stacey and Keelay, not really, aside from, you know, email correspondence. And I mostly spoke with your, you know, people who love you. And so this has been like a really humbling and exciting experience in the sort of just inception of our time together. And then Chucky, I went blonde because I needed a change, okay? I needed a change. I needed to feel different. And so this felt like an extreme. And you know, they say blondes have more fun. I'm still waiting. But you know, I'll let you know if that changes.
Thank you for humoring all those questions. I want to go back. We have a little bit more time. I forgot. You know me, I try to keep us on track, but I forgot we actually said we were going to go until about 15 after, and there's still many questions coming in. So I want to make sure I can get to those. Another question that we got earlier from Fred Bates is what plays move you and what playwrights inspire you? And I'd be curious to hear that answer from all of you, actually. Like, what plays have moved you recently and what playwrights inspire you? I know that's like the best, worst question, I think, sometimes to ask people, because it's like, there's so many. As I watch all of your wheels turn. Yeah.
It's also been a minute since we've seen live theater. Sorry, just go ahead.
No, yikes. I think what I start thinking about, and I think about this last year, and it truly is not about the work. It's truly about like playwrights who ignite me as human beings over this last year. And it's just been like, and I know it's like Keelay and I, someone like Keelay is a playwright that keeps me on fire. And I think about Lynn Nottage. I think about Dominique Morisseau as humans. I think about it, 'cause yes, it's about the work, but I think the person underneath the work, that's what I've learned in this last year, actually matters more than the work. Like actually, like how that person moves in the world is important. And as I have just through various kind of online communications and things gotten to know playwrights better, I'm gonna say what is Kion's last name?
Oh, Hersey, Kion
Hersey. Like they're different. For the most part, so many, like everybody I name by and large is queer and of color. And I have learned so much over this last year, and that I now can't wait to be introduced to the work. But truly, like before now, I would have said Lynn, and Lynn is also an amazing human being, to be clear. But you know, I would have said something like a Susan Laurie Parks, or like someone who's been around a while. But like honestly, playwrights writing now, knowing what theater is and writing anyway, like they're my guiding light.
Yeah. Curious to hear from the rest of you. We've got time to hear from all of you on this question. And we also just got a follow-up that I'm going to ask right after that I'm curious to hear your answer to. But who are the playwrights? What are the plays that have moved you, and who are the playwrights that inspire you? I'm curious to hear from all of you on this one.
One of the last plays that I saw before the shutdown was A Strange Loop by Michael R. Jackson. And when you talk about Isaac, when you talk about like, they feel like a play that feels like a diary entry, like that felt like so, I think Michael calls it navel gazing in the show, but like it was so revelatory and like its honesty. It was just, it pushed me to be more honest in my work. All of these playwrights here, I read your work to like prepare because I'm a nerd and I wanted to be prepared for like this conversation. And I was just bowled over by like your craft and like the heart that comes through in all of your work. Like, I feel like, I don't know, I know you, like how well do you know each other? I feel like I know all of you a little bit better, even if I just met you when being a part of this group because of your plays. Your plays are all beautiful. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to do the kumbaya thing and say everyone here right now is inspiring me to be a better. And I know it sounds corny, but it's true. It's true. I read all of your plays and I'm obsessed with all of you now. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback and second that because when I read Stacey, Keelay, and Isaac's plays, they were all very different, but the thing that they all had in common was that after I finished reading each one, I was like, holy shit, like, wow. I was just bowled over. And then I thought like, oh my God, like, and I'm one of them, like, and I get to hang out with these guys. Wow. Certainly all of the playwrights on this Zoom are inspirations to me. I think, the last play that I saw live was actually a little over a month ago. I was visiting Minneapolis and I saw What to Send Up When It Goes Down by Alicia Harris at Pillsbury House Theater, which is located just a couple blocks from where George Floyd was murdered. And so seeing that play in a theater that I consider like one of my home theaters in that community felt like it was a really powerful experience. And as much as, that play, that script is wonderful and of course very well written, it also made me think about about the experience of theater as a whole, right? Beyond the script and what's on the page or what's on the Zoom screen. Because as much as the play itself was powerful, seeing it in that context, in that community with the people that I was watching with and with the people that was performing was also part of what made that experience powerful and great. And it just made me think like, man, if theater doesn't feel like this, I don't want to do it. Like, this industry is so hard. This job is so hard. Like, this is what I want. This is my standard. Like, I don't want to work with people and places that can't make it feel like this. Because this is the reason to do it. It's not like, to do like the 800th production of The Iceman Cometh for, like some upper middle class, whatever.
Yeah. Isaac, anything you want to add to this in terms of plays that inspire you / writers, plays that moved you rather, and writers that inspire you?
Yeah, it's funny because I think one of the last plays I saw before the shutdown was also A Strange Loop, Keelay. I don't live in New York, but I was in New York that summer because I was having my off-Broadway premiere. And I remember wanting to be like, oh man, New York, this is the place, right? Like, so let's see what these folks have cooking. Yeah, there was a lot of good work, but what I remember experiencing was I felt like I was seeing the same play in a lot of different times. And but then
Yes.
I'm just gonna, and then but then seeing A Strange Loop, and what was so beautiful is I saw it next to one of my mentors, Luis Alfaro, who is also a bigger queer Mexican writer. And Michael in A Strange Loop, for those who don't know, like not only is he exploring the intersection between Blackness and queerness, it's also like fatness in addition to that. And it is really, I mean, yes, like different experiences. Luis and I didn't grow up Black in America, and also we grew up Mexican, and there are a lot of parallels in what Michael was doing, and it was one of the first times that I felt like seen. Like it's and I feel like I owe that a lot to a lot of Black writers. Actually, I feel like when I think about writers who inspire me, like 9 times out of 10, the majority of those writers are Black, and they're I think Black writers in America today have been pushing the craft forward for a million years. And so I feel humbled to learn with colleagues and from them. And A Strange Loop, like I think I sat there and cried for like maybe 10 minutes, afterwards, and I'm obsessed with the soundtrack. I listen to it regularly. I mean, just even like seeing that huge set piece, AIDS is God's punishment, like, I mean, yeah, that's...
Yeah, I have not laughed that hard. I laughed to the point of tears.
Yes.
And then I cried. I cried and cried and cried.
And for context for everyone at home, A Strange Loop by Mark L. Jackson was what year would that have been? 20?
Oh yeah, Pulitzer.
2019 or 2020?
2019.
I don't know how it counts. 2019 Pulitzer Prize winner for drama. It's a pretty amazing piece of work that ran just shy of the shutdown. I feel like it was still around Broadway, and now is in theory going to have a Broadway life whenever that's possible after winning the Pulitzer. But just for context for what it was that Stacey and Isaac were mentioning. We have time for a couple more questions from the chat, but there was one that came in that I want to ask and kind of combine with the question that I have for all of you. We've talked a little, you all have already kind of talked a little bit about what it's been like for you to be in this ensemble, but a question that we got was, how do you find being in said ensemble, formal and informal, is going to affect, or maybe already has affected your work? I know it's only been a couple of months, but that was a question that we got, was how do you find it being in this ensemble, or any ensemble for that matter, formal or informal, as it says here, impacts your work? And I want to couple that with another kind of question maybe to help bring us to a close, which is that, what would you say amongst all of you are the things that you are the most excited for within your tenure as members of our Playwrights Ensemble over these next 3 years? And I'll vary that question up more specifically by asking, what, if any, questions, and you don't have to answer them tonight, but what questions do you have for each other? Because one thing that you all kind of buried the lead on that I love is that when we formally introduced you all via email, you all, completely independent of me or Kat or anyone else, like started your own email thread and shared plays and like started building your own and I was so excited because I was like, oh, this is stuff I thought I'd have to try to orchestrate, and you all did it naturally, which I love. But I'm just curious, like, how are you finding, or how do you expect to find that being in an ensemble like this will impact your work over the course of the 3 years that you're doing it? And what questions or curiosities do you have for each other? You don't have to answer those as you may put those out there for your colleagues, but I'm curious if we can maybe use that as a closer question. Anybody can go first.
I love being in cohorts with people. I find that I usually learn more from the people that I am in cohorts with than whatever the formal institutional benefit of an experience is. Stacey and Keelay both so far have gotten messages from me like, hey, what are you doing? I have a question about this thing that I think you know about. Isaac, you'll probably have one coming one of these days. I don't know what it is yet, but stand by. So yeah, I love building community and I love being in community. And so I'm now like, oh my God, all these more people now who have to put up with me.
Yeah.
You are welcome. I love having been in a few fellowship cohorts, and now I feel like this is the grown-up fellows cohort, because like I've got a career now, so we're not going to be as I don't think as much like, what, I wonder if I'll ever make it. Like we won't be saying. Like,
true.
I hope not, because one, I feel like all of us have learned that at this point, making it can mean many things.
Yeah.
But I really, I always take something from the cohorts I'm in, and I'm hoping I leave something. So I'm always excited to be in community with new folks and really kind of build those relationships and have, there is something that is said in recovery that I'll share here, but it's like the broader the base, the higher the point of freedom. So basically the bigger you build your base. And I think it's just like my base has now come to include Chicago and Minneapolis and Charlotte and New York. And so it just feels like I am in community, and this cohort feels very special to me because it feels, because of the time, the time investment that VG is giving us, and they're really giving us time to become a family and kind of lean in on one another, which I plan on doing.
Yeah. Keelay, Isaac.
Yeah, I echo everything that has been said, and I mean, I've been in many writers groups, and usually I was the diversity hire because I was both Black and queer, and now I have a bunch of brown and Black folks to hang out with, and it's not just me, sort of like trying to explain things to a cohort that doesn't inherently understand what I've gone through. So that will be a lovely experience to just be like, yeah, I'll get it. You know?
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, Keelay, and echoing everything everyone has said, and exactly, like I think about the residencies I've done with cohorts, and if not the only one, I'm one of 2 or 3, and it's usually one of every other race and ethnicity, and then everyone else happens to be white. And whether or not it was Ken Met's intentionality or not, I do think there's something really special about allowing us the opportunity to build community from that shared place. And I think what in terms of, it's so funny because what you learn as you learn about being an artist or a writer, at least in my experiences, is whenever I'm around other artists of color, it I feel us actively trying to combat scarcity and to try to live in a place of abundance, because we know what scarcity feels like. And that's what I admire a lot about these 3 writers in particular. And then, I mean, I have a million questions for all of them. And most of it being like, just from like a process way, like how do you start? How do you edit? How do you end? Like I love those little quirks. I'm kind of a little nerdy about that. I like knowing, like, where's Stacey's spot? You know what I mean? And like, can she only work on one thing at a time, or is she bouncing between things? Is Marisa, does she keep to herself the whole time, or when does she bring in community and actors? Is Keelay running around his apartment, like reading his shit out loud to himself and laughing and crying at the same time? So like,
like you seem to egg them all in this description, which is hilarious.
I want to know. And I think what excites me on a very personal level about Victory Gardens is I have a long history with this institution, and this theater company has been through an incredible amount of obstacle and adversity and transformation and change. And I feel very humble to be present in its next phase in an artistic way, and to the point where it renders me like speechless, honestly, because this is a very special theater, and I know for the board members present, for the people who have either been coming to Victory Gardens forever or who just started, like, you know why you're here. And I hope you don't give up on this theater. And I'm excited about what where this leadership's going to take us and where these playwrights are going to take Chicago. That's really meaningful.
If I can, sorry, that was such a great note to end on, Isaac. I'm sorry, I wanted to
Go for it. Go for it.
Really quickly. Something that I appreciate so much about the Victory Gardens Playwrights Ensemble experience, about these other writers, and also about the way that Ken, Matt, and Kat, and all of the VG staff have kind of structured this, is that, at least in my experience, when you come into something like this, I've had experiences where it's like, oh, you know, the whole time that I'm here, I have to kind of try to audition, you know, and prove myself. And like, you know, maybe if I do a really good job, you know, these white people will like me and they'll do one of my plays, or, you know, whatever. And then I've had experiences, you know, where you come in and it's like, oh, like, just because you're here, like, you're enough. And all you have to do is be here and, you know, be you and show up and bring your work, whatever that is. And I feel like the way that we've been building relationship as a group of playwrights, and also the way that Ken, Matt, and Kat, and the whole Victory Gardens staff has been supporting us thus far, I really appreciate so much, because it feels like a staff where we can show up and bring our full selves and our work and our vulnerability, and whatever it is, it's going to be okay. And we have a theater that has committed to supporting us and being in relationship with us over an extended period of time, which is so rare and special. And I think especially as artists of color, we so rarely get those opportunities where, like, actually it's okay to take a risk and fail, you know, and you're not going to be kicked out, or it's not going to be like, oh yeah, well, we tried doing that one thing with, you know, that Native playwright that one time, but it didn't work out. And so I do want to name that is something about this experience that feels so special and that I'm so grateful for.
Yes. Well, folks, that's such a lovely note, I think, to end it on. And I just want to thank everyone at home who tuned in to watch with us tonight. And I want to also just give a big thank you to all four of you for joining us. Isaac, glad that you could finally make it too, friend. So glad you were able to sneak in. And one last thing I wanted to just really mention, apropos of what everyone just said, as a reminder in terms of how this now functions structurally, these four humans that you see here will be the panel of people that I work with in 2.5 to 3 years from now, give or take, to select the next group, right? So this is a new era of the Playwrights Ensemble that's functioning in a new way, where it's turning over a little bit more frequently. And this is our first group functioning in this way. And there'll be many things that we will learn over these next couple of seasons. But I'm really excited to have all of you here. I want to really just quickly thank Mayor Brown again for sponsoring this town hall, and thank all of our attendees, as well as especially our board members in particular that are present. And also a big thank you to our interpreters who joined us tonight. Thank you, Julika. Thank you, Vera Marie. We really appreciate you all for being in here. And thank you all. And we will see you at the theater soon. Expect an announcement from us within the next couple of weeks about when you can come join us. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye, everyone.